Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's my honor to present the proposed extension with Republic Services tonight. Just give you a little bit of history. This is a partnership that we've had for 23 years, dating back to 1996. The city of Mesquite used to own a landfill located in southeast Dallas that was sold in 1996, and at the same time, the city outsourced our commercial solid waste operation and our commercial commercial recycling operations to a company called Laidlaw. In 1997, Laidlaw was purchased by Allied Waste Systems, and Allied Waste Systems is doing business as Republic Services. So our partnership goes way back to 1997. The original contract was for a 20-year term, 10-year period with 2 5-year renewals. In 2009, we changed some recycling language to allow, at the time in the original contract, recycling was supposed to be free for our customers. In 2009, there was a contract renegotiation that we started charging for commercial recycling a nominal fee. And at that time, they also changed the contract term to be a 5-year base term with 2 5-year renewals. In 2014 was the first 5-year renewal that was exercised, that was approved by the council. And tonight we are proposing the final renewal period of that 2009 contract, which will be we're proposing a 3-year term with 2 1-year optional renewal periods. Just a little bit about our customer profile. There's approximately 2,100 containers in the city of Mesquite. Most of those are what we call front load. These are the boxy containers that have a lid on the top. Most of our small businesses are downtown businesses, churches. This is our most common type of container, and these are the front loads. That's, again, 74% of the containers are a little over 1,500. Industrial containers are about 12% of our customer profile, and recycling is about 14%. Now, majority of those recycling containers are very similar to the front load containers. 1% of that recycling number is actually for industrial recycling. So, again, front load customers are probably the largest number that we serve. Before we started negotiating on this proposed term and proposed contract extension, we worked with Republic in doing a survey of all DFW area cities, particularly in the Dallas County, and some of our competitive set cities in other counties as well, such as Collin County. We looked at 15 different cities, and one of the things that we found in our survey is that we simply have some of the lowest solid waste rates in the DFW region, and we have for a very, very long time. That's good news. It's also bad news. I'll get to that in a minute. But 94% of our rates, every October you approve 33 different rates. 94% of those were in the bottom third of our 15 cities that we compare ourselves to. In 60% of the cases, we're either the lowest or the second lowest. And 33% of our rates, we are the lowest rate in our competitive set. You'll see that in just a minute. Our front load rates are 22% below the average rate. And I emphasize that's below the average rate, not the top rate, that's below the average. Our industrial haul rates are 46% below the average industrial haul rate in our competitive survey. And then our disposal rate is about 45% below the average as well. Why are rates so low? Quite simply, back in 1996, we had rock bottom rates because of that land sale, the landfill sale, and outsourcing both solid waste and recycling at the same time. Secondly, our rates have just not grown over time. The annual adjustment that you approve every October has been historically a very nominal increase. The last 4 years, the average annual increase in rates has been less than 1%. It's been a 0.96% increase each year for the last 4 years. So when you're growing at less than 1% and your rates are already low, the rates really never grow over time. And some of our competitive set cities have grown. This is just, again, another way to illustrate our front load rates and where we're at, 22% below the average. You can see at the very top our entry-level container. That's a 2-yard container. It's collected once a week. The average rate is $72. We charge $39.71 today. That's 45% below the average. I'll take you down to near the bottom, the 8-yard containers. Those are some of the more common sizes. We have a little bit more customer count in the 8-yard container size. Our rate is just below $110. Average rate's a little over $150. So you can kind of get an idea where we're at in the marketplace. This is the industrial comparison. We have one rate no matter the container size. A lot of cities will charge higher rates for bigger containers. We just historically have always just charged one rate. We we've looked at other options, but honestly, for 23 years, we provided one rate for industrial, and I think that was a method we just decided to stick with. But you can see as the containers get larger, the discrepancy between where we're at and the market grows wider as well. So right now, for a 20-yard container, we're 32% below the average. If you go down to a 42-yard container, we're 55% below. When we began meeting with Republic back in November, obviously we all had some goals that we wanted to accomplish. Republic has been a good partner for 23 years. I think it was important for us to try to work out a deal to retain them. They're providing our service to our businesses, and I think any disruption in that process, would obviously be a big challenge. They're also in a better position to offer lower rates than any of their competitors. If you were to bring in someone from the outside, they would probably have to spend approximately $7 to $8 million in new trucks and new containers to come in and service our business community. So there was a distinct advantage to try to keep Republic as our service provider. But one of the big challenges they had is you saw that our rates were so low that the rates barely generate enough revenue to cover their cost structure. And with some of the recent changes in the recycling market, which we'll talk about in just a minute, the losses they've been incurring in recycling has made this essentially kind of a negative cash flow contract for them. And so Republic, in order to retain their services, they had to have an adjustment in rates. And so our job was to try to make sure that rate adjustment was as minimal as possible. And then, of course, we felt like we did need to address our recycling pricing model. So here's some proposed terms. This is also in your staff report. We're proposing a 3-year term that includes a 6% increase in front load rates, an industrial haul rate from 197 to 232. We're proposing that you no longer regulate the recycling rates, which makes that an open market. So commercial recycling customers can now bid out and contract with their own provider of choice. They can negotiate, and they can have customer choice and try to mitigate any rate increases. We have a street and alley fee right now that's 9%. We're proposing a 1% increase in that street and alley fee. Obviously, 9% of the gross revenues from this contract goes to helping fund street repair and alley repair. And we think this extra 1% increase can go to help fund litter mitigation. This was discussed at our budget workshop last summer, I believe. And so that 1% would actually cover the cost of a 2-person crew to drive around in some of our high-impact areas and some of our commercial areas in town and help remove litter. I talked about our rates haven't grown over 23 years because of our annual adjustments. Our CPI increase just has been nominal. And so we're proposing annual increases of a 4% fixed increase plus a CPI adjustment. But we are going to change the metric under the CPI. Right now we use what's called a DFW urban CPI. And we're going to change that, or we're proposing to change that, to what's called a water sewer trash index. These are all indexes that are provided by the United States Department of Labor. So we're still using a CPI index. We're just using a different one that is more reflective of the cost to operate sanitation services and water and sewer trash services. So that is one of the changes that we're proposing. And I talked about the 3-year term with the 2 1-year renewal options. So let's look at what would the impact be if you approve this contract extension tonight. This is our entry-level front-load container. It's the 2-yard collected one time a month. You see our current rate on the screen is $39.71. We are the lowest rate in this market. And with the 6% increase, you'll see that would yield a new rate of $42.09. We are still $30 below the average rate and about a little under $20 below the next closest city, which is Rowlett. 8-yard container, what would the impact be of a 6% increase on front load rates? You see right now we're last in the market. We are at $109. Louisville is second to last at $113. So a 6% increase would bump us to the second lowest instead of the lowest. And if you remember, one of our goals was to maintain our position in the market. 60% of our rates were either the lowest or the second lowest in the market. So we're still kind of meeting that goal. And that would yield a rate of $115.59. Again, that's still about $40 less than the average charge for this particular service. Here's our proposed industrial. Right now we have a price of $197.31 per haul, and we're proposing going to a $232 per haul rate. That is third lowest in the market And let me talk a little bit about Grand Prairie and Plano, just to help, in case you're wondering why are they so much cheaper than we are. Grand Prairie has their own landfill in their community, and that's a big reason why they can control costs and have lower rates. Plano, the 182.41, is actually a blended rate. They have 4 rates in Plano. Plano operates 2 transfer stations in their town, and so 80% of the industrial hauls are charged a $165 fee, and as long as they go to the Plano transfer stations. The 20% of the cases, the industrial haul has to go all the way up to the landfill in Melissa, and so it's a much higher charge. So if you're in North Plano and your industrial container has to be taken to the landfill in Melissa, you're going to pay $209 per haul. If you're in Central Plano, you're going to pay $251 per haul. If you're in South Plano, you're going to pay $293. So the rate you're looking at here for Plano is a blended rate of all 3 of those. And I've spoke with the Plano solid waste manager to make sure this is a fair representation of their numbers. So again, you see though from 197 to 232, we're maintaining our position as the 3rd lowest. We haven't moved, and we're still $100 below the average rate, and we are $50 below our neighboring city as far as their rate. Let's talk a little bit about recycling, because this is an article that was published through the AP wire over the weekend. This is the New York Times article that talks about the increasing costs of recycling. And I don't want to get off on recycling or on residential recycling, but I do just want to point out, obviously, this is a nationwide issue that recycling costs have skyrocketed for all cities and for all private and public waste haulers. Let's take a look at what's happening. If you look at the chart on the right, this kind of shows what's happened to the mixed paper market since China started to tighten its control. China imported about 40% of the world's recycling commodities. And in 2016, 2017, they decided they didn't want to become the world's recycling dump, for better or for worse. And so they gradually started changing some of their policies on what they would allow for imports and lowered their contamination rates. And you can see the impact it had on a ton of mixed paper in March, just 3 years ago. In March of 2016, a ton of mixed paper would sell for $97.50 per ton. Last March, after the China ban went into effect, where they only allow 0.5% of contamination, you see that the commodity price dropped by $90 down to $5 per ton. The picture in the middle is essentially, those are tons of mixed paper that are sitting at a material recycling or material recovery facility, essentially a transfer station for recyclable materials. And I believe this picture is from a facility up in the state of Washington. That is mixed paper, tons of mixed paper that's set outside because the inside of the facility is full with mixed paper tons and bales, and it was rained on, and so now all of that tonnage will be shipped to the landfill and disposed of. Quite frankly, there's just nobody to purchase some of these recyclable materials. So the market has obviously changed. So commodity prices falling, particularly because of China's ban, has had a huge impact on the recycling market. Americans are recycling now more than they ever have, so that's contributing. So there's more recyclable materials to deal with and even less of a market. So that's compounding the situation. And then we have higher contamination rates. About 10 years ago, 7% of recyclable materials was contaminated. And now that is up to 25 to 30% of that is contaminated. So when you get a bale of recyclable materials, there's a larger portion of that cannot be recycled and has to be disposed of. So what that means is essentially you're paying for higher processing costs. I want to talk about lightweighting, and I brought my bottle of water. This bottle of water is made with about half the plastic that it used to. So in order to get 1 ton of plastic bottles of water, you have to have twice as many plastic bottles. So now you're processing twice as many materials at the facility. And so your processing costs are going up because of increases in technology and some of the changes in how the plastics manufacturing is working. So that's a little bit about what's happening to the recycling market and why we're proposing that we stop regulating recycling rates. It's a volatile market, and when you propose, annual rates that are only adjusted every 12 months, and you have a volatile market like this, the rate structure just quite simply can't keep up with the market. And I think that's why Republic, is in a negative cash flow position with this contract, and we'll talk about our rates here in just a second. This is just an example of a recycling cost model. You can see it costs money to collect a ton of recyclables. It costs money to process it at a material recovery facility. And then for the 25 to 30% of the contamination, that has to be hauled off and disposed of at a landfill. So there's a cost to that. So you look at a total cost per ton of recyclable materials that could range anywhere from $150 to $185. Now, these aren't Republic's numbers. These are just some numbers based on some market data that's out there. But look at the commodity sale that's just below that. Mixed paper sells for $5 per ton. Mixed glass is said to have no value right now, colored glass that's mixed in with other glass. Cardboard, which is typically one of the more profitable lines of the recycling business, is down from some all-time highs. I think it's trading a little under $120. So obviously you can sell recyclable commodities, but it's not covering the cost to process and to pick it up and to haul it. Now look at the right-hand side of the screen. These are our entry-level recycling prices, $16.76. I mean, clearly you can see that may cover the cost of invoicing, but certainly it's not going to cover the cost of collection or processing or disposal. So that's really what's going on in the recycling industry, and that's one of the main reasons why staff is recommending that we don't regulate recycling rates, that we allow it to be open market. Customers can call all their different providers, they can bid it out, they can negotiate and try to get the very best rates that they can find. We're also fortunate on our staff. We have a sustainability coordinator, and Kathy Fonville is here. I won't embarrass her, but she's sitting on the second row over there. And one of the things that, one of the benefits, I guess, of having a recycling or a sustainability coordinator is that Kathy can work with local businesses and schools and anyone else who has questions or concerns about how do I recycle, what can I recycle, what's most profitable in the market, how can I minimize my costs. And I think our public works team, in conjunction with Kathy, can help provide some waste audits for local businesses. She can provide education and training if anybody has any questions on how to deal with the new market strategy when it comes to recycling processing and pricing. Excuse me. So tonight, staff is requesting that you authorize the city manager to execute a renewal agreement with Republic Services for a 3-year term with 2 annual options. And I know I rushed through that. It's a lot of information, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. No, it's very good. Anyone have any follow-ups? I see Deputy Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, the recycling is just for commercial.
Yes, sir.
We'll still do recycling for our neighborhoods and stuff, right?
Yes, sir. This is just for the commercial side. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Nosek.
So the only question I had is, in going to an open market on the recycling, how does that affect our ability to police the exclusivity for the waste haul?
In terms of making sure that it gets recycled?
No, making sure that the waste, the commercial waste, is only being picked up by the franchise or by Republic.
Well, under this going open market, and what we're presenting is that Republic will just be one of numerous competitors that a business owner can call to process their recycling. So it won't be exclusive just for Republic. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, so my question is, how do we police folks that may try to game the system?
Sure.
That go with the smallest possible industrial container that they can get, and then negotiate another term for the recyclables, and just throw all of their trash into the recyclables?
Yes, good question. So we passed an ordinance, the council passed an ordinance in 2014 that did offer a permit, and so for recycling. And so I think what we'll do is you'll see that ordinance come back to you, or we'll have some policy recommendations that we will ask any permit holder who will recycle in the city of Mesquite for our commercial customers. We will ask to see data and receipts of where they're taking that material, what material recycling facility they're disposing of it. We'll ask for tonnage. And so we'll basically try to track and make sure that no one is essentially taking recycling and throwing it in the landfill, because that undercuts Republic Services and their business. And it's it's not being transparent when you say that you're recycling but you're taking it to the landfill. So yes, we're aware of that, and we're going to look for to ways to close those loopholes and make sure that we can police that through the permitting process.
Yeah, and I think one of the components you may want to make sure that we include in that is that if we are going to have a required permit for those recycle haulers, that any sort of impropriety results in the revocation of that permit as part of that process.
You bet. Good suggestion. Thank you, sir.
The only other thought I had was the slides that you presented on where we fall with regard to our pricing relative to the rest of the market, especially here in the Metroplex, are very informative and very impactful in terms of justifying the need for the increased pricing. And I would hope that we are going to do some sort of, either through Republic or through a combined effort, some sort of public education, because I presume that our industrial and commercial waste users are going to be less than receptive to the price increase and will not see the value that we've been delivering all of these years. So.
Great point. Yes, sir. I think I've probably undersold our marketing and public education efforts that we'll be rolling out with all of these changes. But absolutely, we'll be making sure that everyone's aware of the market and why the need for the increase.
Yes, sir.
I'll just, first I'll say, I never like to have to go up on these things. I like us to be as competitive as we can. But I think you've made a good argument here, and I'll concur with Councilman Noche that I hope that we would put together a good public education program because we're going to be asked about this, and staff will be asked about this. So let's have a good game plan to explain this to our local businesses.
Very well.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. It's always good when you've got several council members around the table that have to absorb these increases as well as the ones that are being passed on to our constituents. So we feel the pain just as much as a lot of our folks do. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Jones.